Hi, it's Make It Month 5, and in the last video we were looking at how to set cabochon stones using little pre-made, machine-made bezel cups. So in this little video I'm going to show you how to make your own settings from scratch using bezel wire. So if you remember, the bezel wire comes in two main widths, heights. You get 3mm and 5mm, and the one that you use is dependent on how tall your stone is, how tall the curve of your stone is. So if I hold this little 3mm one next to this little rainbow moonstone, you can see that this is plenty tall enough for that stone. If I use something higher, it's going to be too tall and would end up covering up all the stone. So I'm going to take my bezel wire, I'm going to wrap it around the outer circumference of my stone. So I've wrapped it nice and tight around the stone, and then using the Sharpie I'm putting a little mark where it overlaps, and then I can straighten this out and cut it to size. So to cut it I'm just going to use my shears. There we go. And then I'm just going to give it a little mallet to straighten it out. And now I've got a little straight bit of bezel wire that's the right circumference for the stone that I'm making my setting for. Next thing I want to do is just check these ends and make sure they're nice and flat. If not, you could file them with a little file. Next I need to bring the two ends of my bezel wire nice and flat together, same way as if I was making a ring band. So I've just got a pair of pliers, I'm bending it. I'm not trying to make it round or oval or the same shape as the stone, I'm trying to get the two ends together nice and flat and tight and straight. Like that. And then it's ready to solder. If you find that it's popping, so your join pops apart, you can do a little wiggle up and over, and that will just work harden it slightly, and it might make it sit a bit more secure. But that's ready to solder now. I've fluxed my join with the borax, and I've put a small piece of hard silver solder directly underneath that join. Now I'm going to light my torch and I'm going to heat that join evenly on both sides until it's up to soldering temperature. And that's it gone. I'm going to turn my torch off. I'm going to pick up my setting, and as you can see, because it's fine silver rather than sterling, it doesn't oxidize in the same way. So I'm not going to need to pickle it, but I do need to cool it down in some water. So all I need to do now is dry this off and reshape. So I'm going to take my little setting, I'm going to shape it back over my stone. And then it needs to be a nice shape, so it needs to follow that outer circumference nice and smoothly. So what you can do is pick it up and sort of rock the bezel on the edge of that stone so that it should be nice and smooth and oval rather than all wonky with little corners. That's getting there. There you go, and you can see at the minute the wall is still quite high to my stone, so I'm going to file that down. So this is a nice smooth oval shape fitting on the outer circumference of my stone, and the next thing I need to do is have a little base to solder it onto. So this is going to be the bottom of my setting. Now it's really important, if you remember from the when we're doing the videos on the soldering, that there's no gaps and daylight where the bottom of my bezel meets my setting. Now normally there is when you first do it, so what that means is having to file sand that a little bit, and probably having to sand this as well. So the easiest way to do that is to take some sandpaper, place the sandpaper on a nice flat surface, and then put your piece on top and give it a sand until you've got nice even marks all over, no raised shiny areas. I'm going to do the same with my setting. In an ideal world, you want to be doing figure of 8 movements when you're sanding, because you're going to get a more even finish compared to doing this where you might be leaning quite hard in one area. And then you want to keep checking it on your base, get down at eye level, and you're just checking that there's no daylight, no big gaps. And then when you've got a nice flush join, it's ready for soldering. I've fluxed my base piece and the bottom of my bezel. I've dropped some silver solder in there. It's hard silver solder again, and it's sat flat on the base but butted up against the edges of the bottom of the bezel, so it's touching both bits that I'm aiming to join together. And then what I need to do is, if you remember back to the soldering, both elements that you're trying to solder together need to be the same temperature. That does not mean heating them the same amount. So in this case, the base is thicker and bigger and lower down than the skinny little bezel, which means the bezel, if I heated them the same amount, would melt before the base was even up to soldering temperature. So I'm having to heat the brick and angle the torch so that I can start to heat the base without directly putting the torch onto that bezel. Like so. Heating the base, missing the bezel. I'm going to keep going until the solder flows, and I want the solder to flow fully around that entire join. There we go. I now have my little setting cup and my stone, and what I need to do now is cut all this excess base away. Now sometimes you leave a base as a design element, which I'm going to show you in one of the next videos, but for this one I want to cut that base away so it looks like a solid cup, very similar to the little machine made ones we were looking at last time. When you cut your base away, you've got a couple of choices. You can either saw it, or you can use your shears, or you can throw it on the floor. If you saw it, you've got greater control of getting closer to your edge, getting a nice close cut, but you also have a chance that you're going to start cutting into the edge of the setting, which you don't want. So sometimes if you're new to sawing, it can be easier to use the shears. No matter what you use, make sure you're cutting straight to the wall, not on an angle, because you'll cut the base off your piece. I'm going to saw around one side and cut the other side with my shears so that you can see the difference. So to saw it, I need to make sure it's on my bench peg. I've got it nice and supported. I'm going to push up initially. I'm going to put a little bit of wax on my blade as well. I'm going to push up initially to notch into the middle, and then I'm going to straighten up. And I'm going to cut nice and close to the edge of my setting, following the curve, without cutting into the wall. The further back in my peg I can support it, considerably easier rather than trying to cut it. There, you want nice support underneath. So sword around that edge. The other edge I'm going to cut with my shears. You can either use straight shears, or because I've got a curved pair, I'm going to use some curved ones. And again, I'm just going to take my time and cut it as tight as I can to the edge of my setting, following that curve round. There you go. So the edge that I sawed got much closer to it. The edge I cut with the shears, although it was quicker, you can see I've got those little sort of sticky out bits, so I'm going to have more filing to do with that one. Either way, when you come to file it, support it on your bench peg, push and lift. Normally when I'm filing bezel cups, I try and shove my finger inside the cup a little bit, stick the edge of the cup in a little notch on the end of my bench peg that you can file in if you haven't got one, and then it's a bit easier to hold. But otherwise, push and lift, push and lift, push and lift, and it keep going for longer than you think, because people normally stop when you can still very much see where the base is and where the wall of your setting is. You should be able to keep going until it looks like one solid piece. Just be careful you're not accidentally filing on an angle and filing big chunks out of your the wall of your setting. So I've been filing for a while now, and can you see this side I've stopped too soon, so I've still got that very obvious line, very obvious line where the bezel meets the base, whereas this side I kept going. This is the side that the join was on, and can you see, although I need to give it a sand to get rid of the file marks, you can't see where the base was, where the bezel joins the base. You can't see where the join is because I kept going. So I would say that's one of the biggest things I see all the time when people are learning. They stop far too soon and you end up with this unsightly line being left. So just keep going. Like I say, you've just got to be careful that you're not accidentally filing on an angle and therefore filing this top edge away. The wall of my setting is quite high for my stone, so I want to take some of this height down a little bit. So I've got two choices. I can either file it, in which case support it, push and lift. Sometimes it's easier to do this once your setting is soldered onto whatever it's going to become, so your ring band or, you know, earrings, whatever. The other option is to get my sandpaper, have the setting upside down, and figure of 8. And just keep going until you've taken a little bit of the height off, and keep checking it that it's nice and even and that you're not filing or sanding on an angle. I've decided to make a little washer, a little textured washer, and that's what I'm going to solder onto my little bezel cup so that I can turn it into a piece of jewellery. I should be fine just to pop it on there, but if I was worried or I wanted the cup to sit the same height, I could use something like this little cotter pin to sit the other side on, just so it's a bit more balanced. And then I just need to get this as central as possible. So it's sat on a little bit of solder. I've used Easy this time. There we go. So what I need to do is, remember, both bits have to be the same soldering temperature. So that bit, that little washer I've made, is a bit chunkier. So I'm going to concentrate most of my heat onto that, and then I'm going to heat in the middle of my bezel a tiny amount. I'm heating the air initially so that the flux can evaporate nice and slowly and controlled. And then I'm angling my torch so that I can get that little washer up to temperature without overheating the setting. So now I've got a bit of colour through the washer, I'm going to dip in and get a bit of heat in the setting, back out onto the washer, into the setting, and that's the solder flown, and we're all done. Super quick. But as you can see, every time you heat your piece, the original joins will re-show, but because we've done all that filing, it should just be a little quick buff with some sandpaper to clean it off. So in the water to cool it, in the pickle until it's nice and clean. So it's all soldered on, setting is out of the pickle, all clean, and I've given it a quick sand with some smooth sandpaper. Because my stone is so translucent, it is really, really, really important that the inside of my setting is as completely clean and shiny as possible. Now, further on into the project we're going to look at using rotary tools, flex shafts, so motorised tools with lots of different bits that you can get that will make cleaning up the inside of things like this very, very easy. In the meantime, sandpaper. So find sandpaper, scrunch it up and just get in there best you can, nice and clean. If you've got a brass brush, you can wet it, use a brass brush all over to make it nice and shiny. You can use your brasso, the silver, all the things we looked at in the first month, but it's just about getting it as clean as possible. Once it's clean, I'm ready to check my stone. So I'm going to pop it in. That's ready to set now. So if you remember again from the last video, I was saying until your piece is finished and ready to set, try and resist the urge of checking your stone fits. If you need to check your stone fits, it's a good idea to lay a bit of dental floss or something in the setting first, across the setting, pop your stone in then, because then if it gets stuck you can ping it out. If you pop it in and it gets stuck and you need it to come out and you've forgotten about the dental floss, pop it in a Tupperware, close the lid, close it fully so you don't end up throwing across the worktop. Give it a shake and normally the stone will pop out. Here's a little close-up. I could have got away with taking the wall a little bit lower, but I think that's fine for where it is. But if I did want to lower it, I could take my stone out and carry on filing or sanding, but I think that is going to be fine. So all I need to do now is set it, and I'm going to use my pusher that we looked at in the last video and my burnisher. If you remember from the last video with the pusher, you support the stone with your finger, push the pusher up against the side of the wall, and then you push and you're rocking over the curve of your stone. And then it's really important to do it at opposite sides of the clock. So I'm going to flip it around, push and rock, opposite side, and now this side, push and rock. You just need to keep going, push and rock. So the reason for doing the opposites is because if I worked around the clock in an order, I'd be pushing the stone up and out, whereas if I work at opposites, I should be gripping it more evenly. The higher the wall is on the stone, the more metal you have to push over and the slightly longer it's going to take to set. And again, if you remember from the last video, it's really important that not only do you push, but you keep that pressure on as you rock over the stone. You see all these little crinkly bits? I'm going to keep going until they have all gone, but now that it's set a bit tighter, it's not as important about doing opposites. I'm just looking for high areas and shoving them over using quite a lot of force. Now that I've got rid of most of those little crinkly bits that were sticking out, I'm going to swap to my burnisher and I'm going to rub the remaining crinkly bits a bit smoother. This is also going to just tighten up that setting, and it's also going to make it nice and shiny. So again, I'm pushing really hard and I'm being careful not to stick that into my hand or scratch it all over my piece. You can either rub sideways or you can go up and over, whatever feels right at any given time. But the important thing is putting that pressure on and forcing that thin metal tightly over the curve of your stone. And just keep going until there's no crinkly bits. You can see I've still got a little crinkle there, so I need to keep pushing at that point. And that's it, starting to smooth out. There we go, so I've been burnishing around the edge, pushing really hard, smoothing it all out, and then when it's as tight as you can get it, you can also run the tip around the very, very top of it just to smooth that out and polish it. We can do it very gently that way, but just make sure you're not scratching your stone or digging into the setting. You're just using that fine point to bring up a shine and just get a nice tight finish like that. So this just needs a little polish and then it's all done. There we go, all polished, all set, little charm. Easy peasy.